Steph, great to see you today. Fantastic to see you, in fact. Ex-retailer, that's why we've got you on to share some of your thoughts. First question for me. How do you think retailing dynamics have changed since you were on the other side of the desk?
I think that quite a lot has changed. So just to kind of put it into context, so I joined Aldi in 2014. So at that time, Aldi had 4.8% market share. Lidl had 3.7%. They were 7th and 8th in the market. So they were behind Co-op and Waitrose. And I remember at the time when I started going in and presenting to the MD at Aldi, and his question to me, Matthew, was, are we ever going to overtake Waitrose? Because we keep talking about we're going to overtake Waitrose. We're going to, move into 6th place. But is it actually ever going to happen? And I said to him, yeah, it will. And he said, well, when would it happen? And I said, well, I don't know off the top of my head, but let me go away and I can look at all of the numbers and I can calculate it. So he's like, okay. So I remember going back the next month in my monthly update and showing him his chart and kind of with a prediction of, and this is when we'll overtake Waitrose. And then just sitting and going, well, I hope that's going to happen. And literally every month from then on in, he'd say, we haven't done it yet, Steph, we haven't done it yet. And I said, no, we said it's going to be kind of over Easter time. And I also then remember speaking to some of my mates that were at Kantar and saying, when the numbers come out on that quarter, can you let me know? Because I've got basically my career hanging on it. Thankfully, it was the exact date that I predicted was when Aldi then overtook Waitrose and then subsequently also Co-op.
Sure. So
if you think about it, we've now moved into 5th and 6th in the market, with Aldi now 9.1% of the market, Lidl are now 7%. So both of them have almost doubled their market share in those 6 years. Yep. Aldi hot on the heels now of Morrison's to move into the top 4, which, by the way, I think is going to happen in the September data. So
we'll hold you to that.
That's my next Mystic Meg prediction. So there's clearly been some really significant shifts in the marketplace. So just that continued acceleration of the discounters, not just kind of the limited assortment retailers like Aldi and Lidl, but also the high street discounters. Mm-hmm. I think what we've also seen then is all the other retailers, so top 4 in particular, really shifting their focus and their trying constantly to compete on price. So thinking about kind of how they compete with that really efficient retailing operational model. And that's really hard to do when you've got different store formats, when you've got different assortments, when you've got staff in stores, when you're also trying to deliver excellent service. Yeah. And operational efficiency. So that's really hard for other retailers to replicate because they just don't work. They don't have the same operational efficiencies. And so they're not working to the same margins to be able to invest in price. So obviously what that then leads to is that the retailers have to then come to suppliers to kind of fund that difference. I think the other significant shift in retail has been when I was at Aldi, we were just seeing Amazon Fresh trialing in the market. Mm-hmm. So I remember sitting in an office and Amazon Fresh were actually trialing in the region where we had our office. And we sat in a meeting and we ordered some ice cream online. And it was at the office door within kind of 53 minutes, I think it was, we timed it. And just that shift to online. And obviously then there's been, nobody would have predicted the pandemic and how quickly that then accelerated that shift to online as well. So I think, we've seen kind of the onslaught of the discounters continue. We've seen that shift in from bricks and mortar to online, pretty much everybody now doing click and collect. Not everybody was delivering that when I worked in retail. And then we've also seen just some significant changes in terms of leadership and ownership of the current top 4, which I think has massively affected their long-term strategic direction. And in some cases, I think now just a lack of direction of, you know, who are they? What do they stand for? How are they different in the market? And then I think the other really big shift has been the emergence of those immediate convenience retailers. So the likes of Get Here and Gorillas and people like that. So, you know, that.
Have you ever used one, Steph? Have you ever used Gorilla or Get Here and timed them? And what was your experience like?
Unfortunately, in the middle of nowhere where I live, I still can't get Uber or Uber Eats or Just Eat or anything like that to deliver to my house. So I haven't. I've spent a lot of time looking on their websites because I've got friends that do live in a postcode that they get delivered to. And I think, you know, it's a phenomenal offer. If you think about the millennial shopper and just that, you know, they're used to thinking about my other past of kind of fashion retail. They've got really conditioned to just having everything now. So, you know, I can order on ASOS and it can be delivered same day. I can order on Amazon if I'm a Prime member and it gets delivered, you know, within 24 hours. So we've preconditioned that generation that you can just have everything right now. And so what those guys are doing brilliantly is just that immediate satisfaction.
Sure.
And, you know, immediate convenience. And I think for young people, that I want it right now is really important. And I think that's where the whole of the rest of the market are going to have to look if you want to survive for future generations, is kind of how do we move things on so that we're kind of accelerating the delivery of stuff.
So it's all about anticipation, I guess, for suppliers, Steph, looking to the future. And of course, right now, we've got this huge cost of living crisis that's looming like a big grey cloud. From a supplier, a client perspective, what do you think are the biggest challenges in the next 6-12 months for suppliers? And it'd be great to hear some of your thoughts on that.
So I think 2022 has been really tough, regardless of which side of the table you're sitting on. I think there is this big feeling of kind of CPI fatigue at the moment. You know, all of the suppliers that we speak to, all of the retailers that I speak to, people are just tired of having non-stop conversations about pricing, because actually the more you're embroiled in those conversations and kind of long drawn out negotiations, you're not getting to the fun bit of retail and supply. You're not getting to have those really rich conversations of longer term strategies, because you're stuck in what's the pricing going to be in the next 3 months. So I think there's a big challenge to suppliers, which is how do you nail down those CPI conversations quickly so that you can get on and talk about all of the value added stuff. I think, you know, we've seen those big public moves from Tesco on some big brands. We know that Sainsbury's are using third parties to help them negotiate. So I expect that retailers are going to be leveraging Christmas space and Christmas features. They're going to be leveraging listings. They've clearly kind of preconditioned us that they are not scared to have some big fallouts with big brands to get what they want. I think then on top of that, we've got a lot of suppliers that are affected by HFSS. So although that's been delayed, actually a lot of retailers are just kind of, we're just going to crack on and do what we were planning to do anyway and make the changes. So there's still all those range reviews that are going to be happening. Then on top of that, if you're working in the drinks industry, you've got DRS being trialled in Scotland as of this month, which just adds in huge complexity. So having to set up separate barcodes just for the Scottish market, or, you know, every pack that used to be in a multi-pack now has to have a barcode because that's the way that the whole system is going to work. So there's loads of complexity being added in. And we're at a time where JBP negotiations all kick off as well. So I think the big challenge for suppliers is how do you take all of that stuff that's happening in the external world And how do you make sure that you're incorporating all of that into your plans in a way that's really simple and easy to execute for your retailers? And how do you make sure that you're really adding value to them and really understanding the challenges on their side? Because I think that remains the biggest way to crack it, is if you can clearly demonstrate that you're adding value to them, that's the way that you get all of these things over the line.
Brilliant. Fantastic. So as an ex-Aldi category director, I think you were, I'm sure you had some interesting conversations with suppliers over the years. So Steph, how do you think the world and the art of negotiating has evolved over the last, even 3-4 years? What do you see in that? And what do you think our clients and suppliers should be expecting in the coming months?
I think it gets harder and harder, if I'm honest. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. So I think retailers are getting far more sophisticated. So their expectations of suppliers are higher because suppliers are getting better and better as well. So if you think about the wealth of information that's available to us all, so from a retailer point of view, I think they're getting a lot more savvy and understanding their shoppers more. So you look at people like Tesco with Clubcard, they've just got mountains and mountains of data to really understand their shopper. And also what we're seeing is a lot of retailers kind of moving more centralized, and just their systems are improving, their access to information is better. So to just kind of give you an example, when I was at Aldi, the store systems and the head office systems were completely separate. So a buyer couldn't see what the stores were selling. And equally, a store didn't know what the bestsellers were at kind of a national level. That's all moved to one centralized system. We know that actually Aldi globally have moved to a centralized system. So now if I'm a buyer, not only can I see what all the stores are actually, what's selling in the stores, but I can also see what price I'm paying for it. And I can also see what all the other markets are paying for it. So that just gives me way more information to now be able to go and negotiate with my suppliers. And I also think the fact that they've just had so much practice this year on things like CPI negotiations, so it becomes far less scary for a buyer to negotiate price if they've just done it 30 times in the past few weeks. So I think the way that negotiations have evolved is just that level of sophistication, the access to data to be able to calculate the value of stuff, really starting to measure the ROI on some of the initiatives that people have put in place, and being able to challenge it and being able to clearly demonstrate, well, that has or hasn't had an effect on my shoppers. So I think that's where suppliers just need to get much smarter on agreeing how are we going to measure success of all of these things that we're implementing. How do we agree that yes, this thing's going to get rolled out? How do we agree that yes, this is the minimum that I need this piece of MPD to hit in order for it to stay in the range? It's kind of setting those clear expectations and then tracking and measuring so that what you've committed to kind of stays in place. I think that's really important.
Sure. So a lot of our clients will have spent the last 2.5 years on virtual meetings. So, we talk a lot about tactics in negotiation as part of our skater process. How do you feel about virtual negotiations? And do you think they will continue as a tactic from the retailers to make sure that, it's more in their favor than the suppliers? What are your thoughts, Steph?
I'm not sure it's a tactic. I think if I was sitting on the other side of the table, so when I was at Aldi, we were actively discouraged from going out, spending time at suppliers because of the time that it takes. So if I've got multiple suppliers that I have to deal with and it takes a day for me to go and see every single one of them, that's an awful lot of time that's wasted in the day. And actually, if I can now get 10 supplier meetings in a day because I'm doing them all virtually, that's a far more efficient use of my time. So I think we always underestimate the amount of time that a buyer has. You know, we all take it personally as a supplier, oh, they don't want to come over to the office and have a tour of the factory and all of that kind of thing. And the reality is they just don't have the time to do that with every single supplier. So I think the ideal would be a mix of virtual negotiations and in person.
Yeah.
So I think as humans, we need human contact, and there's still no better way to build rapport. You know, we always have much better rapport when we see each other in person, you know, even within total negotiation, than sitting facing a computer screen. So there's that human connection that you're just never going to get virtually. But I do think that in terms of the ability to get hold of people quickly, and also maybe getting some senior stakeholders involved that you probably wouldn't be able to get if you were trying to get them in a physical meeting. So the ability to get more senior stakeholders quickly in a meeting, that's where virtual can really come into its own, and where it can be really advantageous. And so it can actually speed up the decision-making process. Whereas actually, you know, and I know from my own diary, trying to get dates in people's diaries where everybody can be in the same place at the same time, that will just delay a process. So I can see kind of positives and negatives. I would really encourage people to try and get some physical meetings going again, just to build that rapport. Especially, there's so many people that have never met their buyer because their buyer started during the pandemic, or they started during the pandemic. So I think if you're really trying to relationship build, you've got to try and get in and see people. And what I've seen quite a lot, and actually it's quite, you know, it's good for the buyers too, is meet them out in a store. Because you learn loads from their perspective of what's going on in the store. And also, you know, it's a good use of their time rather than meeting you in your office, getting out to a store together for them to give you their perspective. And you know, buyers don't spend enough time in store, and most buyers will hold their hands up to that as well. So, you know, arrange to meet a buyer in a store, you've got a better chance of that than them coming to your office probably.
It's a heck of a thought, Steph, isn't it? To think if you're negotiating with a buyer on a virtual meeting, they might be wearing their pajamas, actually, like the rest of us. So, you know, great. Thanks for that. That's some really good advice. Category. You know, I was thinking about this, that, you know, category management in the 90s, if not before, and how it's evolved, etc. You know, with the you know, the real difficult conversations that suppliers have got to have now on CPIs, trade terms, D-weights, promotion evaluation, everything. Do you still think that category thought leadership is a thing of the future? And if so, why? And if not, why?
So I might be slightly biased based on my past, but I was thinking about this quite a lot recently, and I would build it into what I would brand kind of the complete commercial conversation. So I think what you can't have is brilliant commercials that don't work for the shopper and don't demonstrate that you're growing the total pie, or that you're maintaining the pie. You can't have great commercials that only work for your brand. So, you know, with the greatest respect to all of our suppliers and their amazing brands that they have, as a retailer, you don't really care about brands, and especially, you know, a discounter retailer really doesn't care about brands. What they care about is having the right offer for their shoppers that means that they're going to come back and be satisfied, and continuously growing their categories. So I think for me, actually, category leadership is more important than ever, because that's what sets you apart from your competitive set. So I think what you've got to do is really think about the total category from your retailer's point of view. So first of all, understanding what's the role of your category. So when I was at Aldi, I did a load of work looking at the role of different categories. So what are the categories that will really make a shopper switch where they shop? Because they are few and far between. Like, am I going to switch where I shop on the basis that the washing up liquid is 1p cheaper? Probably not, because I probably buy it 3 times a year and I can't even tell you how much washing up liquid was the last time I bought it, because when I run out, I buy it. So I'm not going to switch my shop on that basis. So understanding the role of your category. Is it there as a footfall driver? Is it there as a basket builder? Is it a new category that your retailer hugely under indexes on and can really help them attract some new shoppers? So really getting under the skin of what's the role of your total category. And then within your category, what is your role as a supplier? Where do you play? What's your price tiering? Who are you attracting? How does that fit in with the shoppers that the retailer is trying to attract? How are you adding value? Because if you think about, for most retailers, their big challenge, and especially through a cost of living crisis, is going to be, how do I maintain my market share? How do I retain shopper loyalty? Because as shoppers get kind of more and more price sensitive, there's going to be certain categories that they move out of because they become kind of nice to haves rather than need to haves. So what are the categories that are your absolute staples that people, regardless of what happens to their kind of to their household budgets, they'll continue to buy? So where do you sit in terms of your category? If you are a category that people start to make some choices, how are you going to ensure that as a supplier that you're not the choice that gets chopped out of people's budgets? And how are you going to clearly demonstrate that to your retailers? So I think going in and having that point of view of, based on past evidence, this is how this category reacts when shoppers are forced to make choices. Here's how we can make sure that we either continue to grow or we maintain, or worst case scenario, that we lose the least amount possible within this category when people are forced to make choices. How do we make sure that we're continuing to appeal to all shoppers on all different types of budgets? So have we got entry-level price points for those people that genuinely, it's going to be a struggle for the next few years? How do I make sure that I've still got some accessible price points for this category? How do I make sure that then that the value difference between those products and the higher end products in the category, that for the people spending a lot more, there's some truly added value in that category? So I'm not just going to make everybody trade down. So I think for me, category management becomes more important than ever, because it's really going in and talking about how you understand the shoppers in this category, how you expect them to react, and why you can help the retailer kind of manage their way and navigate their way through.